What's up, folks? This is Rock My World, EP.4. I'm JC Owens, and let's get at it. Alright, today's episode is called The Devil is in the Details. Now, why did I call it that? Well, as I've mentioned before, now I am an Orthodox Christian, but I wasn't always. I was brought up not only steeped in music due to who my family are, but also brought up in Freemasonry, Demole. I went to private school, which is where I learned music. Like they put us in classical music training, right off the bat. We started acting in plays and you know, writing music or learning to write music anyway, play instruments and all this kind of stuff right off the bat. It's one of the reasons that school is so expensive, not to mention its Masonic pedigree, right? But because of this, I'm very, very familiar with the occult, and unlike many rockers out there, I have no reason to gaslight you on it and act like, um, it has nothing to do with the music, that it's all for fun and, for theatrics and all that kind of stuff. I mean, for some it may be, for some. But for most, this is going to be a almost required thing for you to really climb the ladder, right? And you'll see all the stars, they'll be running around with the whole one eye closed thing, or covered. And, this has to do with, basically pledging your allegiances and letting everyone know who you serve, right? Um, once you are part of the club, then the doors will be opened for you. This is how they keep the different levels of the agenda cordoned off from the other levels, right? Which brings me to some of our newest little Nepo baby rockers, going by the name of Stanley Simmons. I don't know if any of y'all saw the interviews with them this past week. Or so, and talking about how their parents have nothing to do with it and all this kind of stuff. Well, first off, let's just say, if you really wanted your parents not to have an influence on it, then you do like I do and not even mention who your family are. Most of the time, you'd try to run on your own steam. But, notice that they also have done all these new poses, the Baphomet pose, covering the one eye. They've done all the things, letting folks know who, they're, loyal to, who they're going to serve. And you'll watch, they'll climb the ladder quite quickly now. Not only because of the, quote-unquote, halo effect, which is a very real occult principle. It works. Everybody knows it works at this point. If you're pretty, and you're talented, people will listen to what you have to say. And if your parents are super famous and talented and rich and they have all this influence and stuff, that's going to matter. When, you call yourself Stanley Simmons, you're invoking your last names right there. Just that in itself is calling upon that power of the bloodline. You're calling upon your own ancient blood and your the public's known the public's knowledge of who your family is to give you a boost, right? Just like the whole covering one eye and all this, it's all about climbing that ladder, folks. All about climbing that ladder. And the fact of the matter is, the job of Hollywood, the entire entertainment industry, from Hollywood to the music industry, is to influence you. That's the whole point. And it's been here since the very, very beginning. You can go all the way back to Paganini and the classical artists of the Renaissance. Paganini famously dreamed the devil, and he taught him a song. And then you go on to Robert Johnson at the Crossroads, and Led Zeppelin and their dabblings in the occult, and Aleister Crowley, and and on and on and on, all the way up to a lot of the stuff you see today out of artists like Lady Gaga and I mean, you name it. And in the metal scene, you have Slayer, you have all these other bands that, you know, they call upon this imagery, and regardless of what your intents are, these symbols have power. And regardless of if you think it works or if you think it's real, people will follow that influence. You see, um, the the trick is to get people to willingly shut their eyes. That's what the devil does, right? Like, he convinces you that he's not real, which then opens you up to his influence. Some of you that are, you know, or maybe most of you that are my age, remember the, you know, the so-called satanic panic. And, you know, it's not that nothing was going on. It's that it wasn't as, like, big as what the media and everyone were playing it up to be. You see, this is how it works. It's in the intelligence agency circles, this is called a limited hangout, right? In the media, they built up this huge case. Oh my, there's devil worshippers everywhere, and like, oh, they're after the children, and like we got to have them in court, and then they get exonerated, and then they say, oh, nothing to see here, folks, nothing to see. Nothing to see. Meanwhile, there's all these other cases that were absolutely real, and like people were actually prosecuted and everything else. But, you know, that's the purpose of the limited hangout, right? Like, it says, hey, look over here, and then it says, oh, see, it was just a joke. And then you stop looking at all of it, right? You know, you'll see a lot of the same people, you know, on the right, for example. They'll call out the left for trying to influence our children through media, but then in the same vein say, oh, well, video games and music and stuff doesn't influence children to be violent or get involved in the occult or any of these kind of things. And I'm here to tell you, it absolutely does. As I've mentioned before, going all the way back to Plato, all the way back to the ancient world, they have always understood that music and pop culture, as we call it now, has a huge effect on the youth. And if you can affect the youth, you affect who they become as adults. And once you've done that, then, you know, you've basically got them hooked. You've basically got them hooked. And, you know, what's the one thing all of us entertainers, singers, songwriters, etc. want? We want people to love us. We want to be famous. We want to be seen. We want to be heard. But, like, you know, you have to ask yourself, you know, what are people willing to trade for that? And, you know, as I mentioned before, the story of Robert Johnson, you know, he was willing to trade his soul for, you know, the ability to play the guitar. Right? Like, that's one of the reasons that story is so important. It tells you, like, what people are willing to do in order to have that magic touch, that ability to influence everyone. And when it comes to the, like, satanic panic stuff now, don't get mistaken and think that it's all like the left that are doing it's all liberals or anything like that. No. The right played their part as well. You see, the right were the ones who played it up and made these crazy claims. They came after everything from Saturday morning cartoons and, you know, and so forth. Like, they made it much bigger than what it actually was, in order to, like, you know, build all this up. That way, when they, like, unveiled it to be a hoax, like, people would, you know, would look away. They all play their part. They all play their part. You can, you know, a guy I know named Jay Dyer, like, he does a great series on this kind of stuff. He has written books called Esoteric Hollywood. I really recommend reading those if y'all haven't already. They are really, really enlightening to how a lot of this stuff works. And Jay talks about this stuff with the Reformation Church all the time. You see, a lot of these Reformation sects were influenced by Freemasonry. Freemasonry is the root from which they all spring, right? It's one of those things that has influenced basically all of these, you know, Western sectarian versions of Christianity in one way or another. from the Mormon LDS Temple to Jehovah's Witnesses to Baptists and Methodists, etc. These doctrines came from there. They came from Kabbalah and Freemasonry and all of these mystery school doctrines. You see, when King James rewrote or had the Bible rewritten into his King James Version, he consulted with Freemasons, Kabbalists, Talmudic rabbi, who are also Kabbalists, by the way. And when they did, they removed Maccabees. They removed around 60, removed and changed around 60 other things in the original version of the Bible that the Orthodox Church gave us. You know, you have to be very, very careful about the interpretations that you go by. This is one of the reasons why we as Orthodox Christians don't do sola scriptura or Bible alone, because our modern interpretation, if we try to interpret it ourselves, words have changed over the centuries. Like, they don't mean the same things to modern people as they did to the ancients. So we can't just take our modern understanding of these things and apply it wholesale to these texts. We need like an understanding first. This is why we have the church fathers who help us understand how the original church fathers and how Christ himself thought, you see. But by rewriting these things, by reinterpreting them, King James is able to make Christianity work for the state. To work for the state and work for Freemasonry, to do what it needed it to do, or needed them to do. These different sects, that is. I was once like part of the the Baptist church myself. I was brought up in it, as well as Freemasonry at the exact same time. And this is one of the reasons I know like that all these other sects are like this. I was in Freemasonry, and every sect of Christianity except for Orthodoxy was represented there. And you even had Muslims, and you had like everything that you can imagine within Freemasonry, as long as they'll accept, one God of some sort or another. But that's just so that, like, you can eventually be trained to think of yourself as that one God, right? To the deification of man, John Dee's quaternary, man making himself a god by his own hand, which is where all this, technology, robotics, cybernetics, that's where all this stuff is going, and that's why they've pushed it this way. They've known for over 100 years where they plan to take all this stuff. And our modern music industry, entertainment industry, was built around this goal. We have to be, as I've said before, we have to be very, very careful about the things that we, expose our children to. I used to be, like I said, part of this very movement, so I know what they want to do, and I know why. Even things like the transhumanism thing, like, is tied to it. This idea of the rebus, this perfect merger between man and woman, like creating an ubermensch, right? Like removing our flaws as they perceive them. But that rests on this idea that, man and woman being separate and different is a problem. The races being separate and different is a problem. And that's one of the things that Christ and the Orthodox Church do. They reconcile the opposites to where we don't have to worry about all of these dialectical tensions all the time. Male versus female, right versus left, communism versus capitalism, and on and on and on. They keep you in this right versus left, good cop versus bad cop trap. And you can't escape it. As long as we keep this imbalance going, the machine will keep going. I guess that's where we will stop for today, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you have a great rest of your Sunday, and I will talk to you later. Peace out.